Welcome to Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, a podcast that illuminates real solutions to common problems within the parking industry. I'm your host, Brian Wolff, CEO of Parker Technology, and in each episode, I'll introduce you to real parking pros that will bring their own tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Today on Harder Than It Looks, we're welcoming back Kevin Uhlenhaker, the CEO and publisher of Parking Today Media. As you probably know, Kevin has spent 25 years in the parking industry as an entrepreneur, an advisor, and a business coach. Over the course of his career, he's led multiple parking technology companies through successful exits and mentored leaders across more than 100 organizations. Kevin joined us last year, shortly after acquiring Parking Today, closing on the deal just 1 week before Pi 2024. Since then, he's completed his first full year leading the publication during a milestone moment, Parking Today's 30th anniversary. We'll talk about that. And at a time when the Parking Industry Expo is preparing for a major shift. Pi 2026 will take place March 30th through April 2nd in Dallas, Texas, marking the first time in many years the show won't be held in Schaumburg, Illinois. Yay. Today's conversation picks up where our last one left off. We'll talk about what Kevin has learned in his first full year at the helm, what's changed with Pi as it heads to Dallas, and how he sees the role of parking today in the industry today. Kevin, welcome back to Harder Than It Looks.
Brian, thanks for having me back.
It's great to have you. And obviously, as we're a year behind where we are, a year from where we were in 2025, everyone wants to know what that year was like. So give us a little snapshot of what you've learned in the year and bring us up to speed on where you are today.
Wow. Yeah. So not to steal your title, but it really has been harder than it looks. I hate to do that to you. So Parking Today, and actually not to correct you, but it'll be 2 years that we've had it. So it'll be our second year anniversary here. So it's been quite the ride, just in terms of kind of both, coming in, and really the first year was just learning the business. And I will say even the kind of like first 18 months, it really didn't feel like my company really about until the 18-month mark. John had done a great job building, any brand that exists for 28 years is doing something right. And so learning all the things that he was doing and all those pieces and learning the business. I might have said this last time, but I made the classic mistake that we've seen so many parking entrepreneurs make, is thinking like, well, how hard can this be? And I made that same mistake going into media, thinking like, well, I've done all this like parking stuff. Like, how hard can media be? And oh, dear God, and if we were doing any one thing, it might not have been that bad, but really is this, publishing a monthly magazine, which has its own set of challenges and yeeks and quirks and mailing all those things, as well as having a website and having, newsletters and mailing and sending out emails today and all the fun challenges there. And, working, with the podcast network with you all, and then the show. Some companies just do any one of those things. And so, of course, we decided, we bought a company that was doing all of them. So it really was a matter of learning each of those pieces. And, Pi last year was our first Pi to ever run. Kind of was already set where the location was and the format, and we didn't know what we were doing. And so this year we've really been excited to kind of take that, like, okay, we have one under our belt. And then now, like, what do we look at from everything we've learned, and what do we want a show to be? So we really were able to be much more of an intentional design approach, as opposed to just the hold on and, hope we don't die approach of last year.
Hold on and hope we don't die. That's funny. Okay, so here's a question. What surprised you most? So I'm sorry, 2 years went by so fast, it felt like a year.
You're telling me, yeah.
So 18-month mark, you feel like now it's your company, but what surprised you most about where you are today and where the business is today?
Yeah, it's a couple things. One is the reach and the impact of Parking Today. Every time I'm out and talking to people in the industry, it's always amazing the stories that they have about how Parking Today has been woven through their career in some form or fashion. And so that's all. It's touching. And especially and for so many people, how Parking Today was their first opportunity at a platform, how it was their first, John gave people their first opportunity to speak ever at a show there at Pi, or first opportunity to write. And so we really want to, we like being that platform, and I like really working hard. Like, how do we have these new voices and give people an opportunity to show what they know, and kind of, so that's been very rewarding, really on practical basis. The other thing that's really been surprising is talking to people outside the industry. So when I was a parking kind of technology entrepreneur, the conversations would go more toward the technology side, not really as much about the business side. Whereas now, being kind of a media company, we're able to talk about the industry in general and kind of what we're doing. And so it's allowed me to share about and kind of, be that, speaking the good news about the industry to people who really aren't thinking about it, because that opening from that media perspective allows me to have those conversations. So that's also been insightful and interesting of, you have people who haven't heard about it, but are interested in learning about it, because it's not, there's nothing for me to sell to them. It's just me to tell them about the industry. So that's really it's been fun to kind of learn and see it through other people's eyes.
Oh, that's really neat. Do you have any stories in particular about somebody on the outside? Because one of the things we talked about last week in Arizona is, how do we change the perception of parking from the outside?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if you feel like you're putting a dent in it in the conversations that you're having.
Trying to. I will say the approach I typically take with people outside the industry is, I always ask them, like, think about your worst parking experience. And everyone has one immediately. And I was okay, think about your best parking experience. And they typically pause. I say, exactly. So for these parking professionals, when they do their job perfectly, they hear nothing. But when they're having their worst day, they're getting death threats. And so they're running something that's essential, that we know is important, and cities run better when parking runs better. Universities run better. Like, all these organizations run better when parking's run best, but it's a utility. No one except for, folks like us think about parking when they go to places. They're thinking about going and doing everything else. So just flipping that perspective with people of having them realize that, like, imagine if your day, you're doing your best job ever, and like, your goal is to hear nothing. And I also tell them, also imagine if your job, that your boss doesn't appreciate or understand the work you're doing, and your customers don't appreciate the work that you're doing. So you're stuck in the middle of doing something that's important, but often you're not getting credit from either side. And so, like, phrasing it that way for people typically allows them to see, like, oh, that does make a lot of sense. And I always ask them, like, hey, when you had a great experience, did you tell anyone? And most people are like, well, no, I never even thought to. I was like, exactly. Like, that's so helping to kind of frame it that way, I think, has been really useful to kind of help open some eyes. And I've had multiple people say or come back to me afterwards and be like, man, now I'm noticing stuff about parking. He's like, you broke me. I look at parking now. I'm like, sorry, that's what I do to people. Unfortunately, like, you're going to be stuck looking at parking now forever, because you can't not see it once it's there.
Yeah. Something that you said, it just clicked for me. I've talked a lot before about how parking people are gritty and they like hard work. They're also really self-assured. Like, there's a core confidence there, and you just put your finger on why that is, because they do a great job and get no feedback. They do an awful job and get horrible feedback, or things go poorly. And you have to be able to sort of pick yourself up by the bootstraps and keep going, because you're doing important work, and stuff happens sometimes.
It's crazy. I will tell you one more thing, which I think you find interesting. Being in now the media business, I've now started going to media conferences, which are really interesting. It's been useful for me with Pi. Is for years, I mean, and you're the same way, like, you go to a parking industry event, there's always someone, like, it's impossible to go. But going to these media events, I literally was going to a place where I knew no one. And so it was just really interesting way to reset how I both looked at shows, but also a chance to talk to people. And actually, one of the shows I went to, and it was a B2B conference, I had people come up to me and be like, wait, you're the parking guy. I want to talk to you. I was like, where have you been all my life? No one says I want to talk to you, the parking guy. But it was this kind of novel, because we were dealing with people who had publications about wire and about airplane parts and about all these other, like, kind of niche industries that aren't nearly as big as what parking is. But it was the first time in a while where people were excited to talk about parking, because it was an industry they hadn't heard of, but it was no different than, like, well, I do one about wire, so, like, yours parking is interesting. So that also has been a fun change of events.
That's awesome. That's a great story. I want to go to that conference so they can go, parking. Wow, tell me more. That's fantastic. Okay, so now, from a responsibilities perspective, what feels heavier now that you're sort of into it 2 years?
There very much more is this, and even more so than my other companies. Parking Today is so well known and it's so visible that mistakes and even the possibility of failure is so much bigger.
Mm.
And that's, we'll say, like, the Parking Today has been the hardest thing I've ever done. It really has been, like, bar none. I would trade, like, co-founding New Park in those early days. I thought stuff was hard. And it's a combination of, I know more now because I've seen it, but also I really feel that, like, whatever we do, positive or negative, there's no hiding. And then that's one of the opportunities we have with it, but that's also one of the risks, is that there's no hiding. So it is one of those, like, okay, Kevin, you're pushing all your chips in here from a career perspective. It's not like it's, you could just shut down a company and no one really notices. Oh no, people notice. So from that perspective, there's that visibility piece, I would say.
Yeah.
But also it's how do you continue and improve on a legacy that's been for so long? I mean, we do have a responsibility to the industry. And I think the role that Parking Today has played as this independent voice for the industry, it's our job to continue that. And I think industries that have those sort of independent voices are better for them. So I do feel this responsibility of being an organization that does that. And, how do we tackle hard topics? How do we help push things forward? How do we bring things up that it's easier not to talk about, but it needs to be talked about? So that's also been one of the kind of responsibilities I've seen it as. It is my role, because I can do those things, to be able to both provide a platform and to put that in front of the industry to at least start the conversation in ways that other organizations just can't, because of the nature of them, or the politics or the things that go along with, being, the associations that they are.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So given that Parking Today is in its 30th year, what do you think has allowed the publication to stay relevant for 3 decades?
I really think the secret sauce has been a mixture of the variety of contributors we've had to the publication. As part of our 30th, we've gone through, one of the things that I got, and John did a really good job about this, is John kept a copy of every magazine he ever published. And so all the way back to 96, when, that first issue, and going through those old annals, you see things change, but it's the voices, it's the experience. And so I really think some of our secret sauce has been, we've worked hard to try and have different varieties of people from different parts of the industry, different areas, and really the fact that our audience is the whole industry. And so it does allow us to talk about things that aren't just maybe in one section there, and that we do learn from, like I might not be running an airport, but the airport could be doing, dealing with a challenge that is similar to mine, that then allows you, like, okay, well, that's interesting. So I think, like, that variety has really been important on that side, and the willingness to stay independent. I mean, I think that independence both causes challenges, but brings an opportunity there from a unique perspective. And I think that you can say, lots of things about John, but I mean, independent is one of those kind of core things. Is he certainly is an independent person. I think that was shown there in kind of the organization he ran, and, kind of that journalistic and independence is one of the things that we want to continue, because I think it's vital for what we're doing, because there are so many varying interest and, politics in this industry. And for being such a big industry, it's a pretty small knit group of people. And that anytime you have that, you have all the overhead that comes with that, right? And so being able to be someone who's kind of not on anyone's side, but on everyone's side, I think there's value in that from an industry perspective.
I hadn't thought about independence. So would you say that Pie's the only independent voice?
I would, which is not to say anything negative about any other voice. But if you look at some of the other, let's say if we're like a show perspective, if we're looking at other shows, they're membership association shows. They exist to serve the members of their association. And not everyone is a member of their association, even in their kind of targeted area. So, I mean, if you look at like an MPA perspective, it's not to say that they're not open to everyone, but primarily they're private operators, right?
Right. Yeah.
And IPMI, they're open to everyone, and there are some overlap, but they're primarily government. That's just the nature of their membership and then the type of services they offer their members. And so I think with an inherently membership structured organization, you have strengths and weaknesses that come with that. And one of those is kind of like a board governance and the politics that comes along with that, and elections. And so it's, from our perspective, we are able to, like, our audience does include all of those members. and the NPA members and people who aren't members and people who might be on the fringes of the industry. And so because we're not a membership association, we're not providing any of those services that membership associations provide. And I think the same thing is true for your regionals. All your regionals are all membership associations. So they are there to serve the members who join the association in their local. And there's a need for that. We serve a different purpose. And so we're not providing those needs. We're really doing is we're a media platform. We're an information platform. So that allows us to do different things and does allow us to be able to independent. And I would argue the one group that does cover the entire industry because it's our nature, inherently in our nature.
Yeah. Okay. So without putting you too much on the spot, can you talk about a topic that independence gives you the ability to expound upon that maybe the associations would shy away from?
I'll give you an example of one. So quick background. So at our show, the way our show is set up this year, the start of every day, we're together. And so it's really this design of the show, it starts together, we break up in individual sessions, then we end back together in some sort of event because we really are focused on this community and connection aspect of it. So our opening session that Tuesday morning, which will have everyone, there's no other kind of programming, is a panel discussion led by Kendra Petty talking about gender discrimination in the parking industry. It's going to be a mixture of the panel of both men and women. And the goal is not to call anyone out, but the goal is more a matter of kind of saying, in fact, we're also doing an article about it in the March issue. So the idea is we're doing an article about it in the March. We're having a discussion there at the show. And it's existing. What are things that people can do on a personal basis to help it? It's not the fact that, HR's got to get involved on the policy. I mean, I think most people in the industry don't want that to happen, but a lot of them just don't know what to do or don't know how much it's occurring. So the idea of that panel is both from a education perspective for people who might not be as much exposed to it, but also what can I do when I do see these things happening? How do I help make these better in these small, types of engagements there? So I think that's a great example of, our goal there. We're not trying to solve for anything, but it's a matter of how do we bring light to a topic and start a conversation and give people at least some tools. So even if just one person walks away from that session, having a better way of, helping a colleague navigate a situation, that's what I want out of it. So I think and we have others like that, but that's probably one of our biggest, highest visibility type of scenario of, we're hitting that head on and having an honest conversation with people who both have lived it as well as people who have been advocates for that in their career.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So you're skipping ahead of me just a little bit, which is fine.
Sorry
I probably led you there.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. I've got one more leadership question for you.
Sure.
And then I've got one more Parking Today media question, and then we'll dive into pie. So, one of the things that I thought about as I was prepping for this is you have now been exposed into large companies. So you've been involved, been a leader in large companies. You've been a CEO of relatively small companies that got bigger. You've exited. I'm curious if you sat back, if you've spent any time thinking about what makes a company successful? What are the threads of success that ran through all of your experiences? And in some cases, it could be the opposite, right? You saw things that didn't work very well, but I spend a lot of time trying to be a student of the game. When I see something that I really like or really works, I'm like, okay, it works because that leader is dynamic or they care about their people or what have you. And so I'm just wondering if you've distilled it down and sort of applied it to the new parking media or Parking Today media business that you're running.
So what I would say is pure luck. No, I'm joking. I would say here's kind of what I've seen, because I have worked for really dynamic leaders that I've learned a lot from, worked for leaders that I've learned a lot from on the, things I don't want to do side, and, again, made quite a few mistakes myself. I think it comes down to a few things. It's having a leader who's willing to make hard decisions. As a leader of an organization or as a group, that is one of the things we're called to do. And to make decisions that are uncomfortable, but are in the best interest of the organization, not necessarily in the best interest of you yourself or the people that you might be close to. And that's sometimes a tall order, but I think the organizations where you had a leader willing to do that, the organization went further, because it is one of those where it's got to be about the organization. It can never be about one individual person, even though we know individual people make a huge difference. It's got to be about that broader basis there. The second thing I would say is having the skill sets for the stage the company's at. There's
Mm.
clearly different skill sets for a company, size of even ours, what we're doing now, versus, the skill sets needed to run something like a Flash of their size, or even or the where we were at a New Park. And that doesn't mean the same leader can't do all those stages, but they have to be willing to acknowledge the fact that some of the strengths that allow them to be really good leaders at a smaller stage are the weaknesses now of to be a leader at a larger stage. And you do see it where they feel like they have to step back, and sometimes they have to bring in leaders that have experience at that level. I don't think that always has to happen if you have someone who's insightful and willing enough to do the work on themselves and recognize the limitations they have and bring in people and create systems that allow them to kind of offset those weaknesses. I think the same leader can do that. It's hard work on that leader to change themselves for the needs of the organization. And then the third thing I would say is the willingness for that leader to understand the nuance of the company and the industry. And I've seen that so many times. And it's one of the things I saw doing my business coaching is I worked with a lot of companies that they weren't particularly great at execution. They weren't bad, but they weren't top notch. And their product wasn't amazing, but they knew the nuance of their industry and what they were selling. And they were able to be very successful and profitable because as much as they knew what to do, they knew what not to do. For the leaders who are willing to either have done it through experience or willing to lean in and learn that kind of nuance of that business and that industry, those companies go much further. And how many times have we seen, and I'm not saying it's just leaders who come up from the outside, but I use them as an easy example. You bring in a leader from the outside, we've seen in the parking industry, who has no experience, thinks, well, how hard can this parking thing be? And then doesn't take the time to learn that nuance and learn the business. And so they make these decisions that were great for other industries or other times they'd done things before, but aren't great for what they're doing. And so to me, I think it's that either if you have it, great, lean into it and use it. But if you don't, learn that company and that industry and what you do uniquely well. The phrase I would always tell my sales team at New Park, I think the same thing is true for businesses, is sometimes the best deal you do is the one you don't. And I think that's one of the hardest things as a leader is to, what do you say no to? And I think to really understand that, you have to be able to know what you're getting into and understand that nuance of what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, those are three great answers. I bet we could build a podcast all by itself around the nuance and what we chose to do and what we chose not to do. So I like those answers a lot. Okay. Thank you for that. That was as rich an answer as I thought I was going to get. So well done. Let me go back to Parking Today Media and ask you to maybe talk about some of the changes you've made, but also how you are sort of honoring the history of parking today.
Absolutely. I came into the business really trying to understand what it was and what it did well and what could it do better. Because like in any organization, it has to change with the times. And so from a change perspective, we really looked at processes, procedures, things that we kept the same. If you look at our magazine certainly looks different now, but from a core of what we're doing and a core structure behind it, both from a column perspective and articles perspective, that we really kept the same. Now, have we tweaked some stuff? Of course. Have we updated some design? Absolutely. We did make some changes in staffing and kind of, once again, finding people who had really good skills in what they do. So one of the things we brought in early on was Jay Landers, who's our editor-in-chief, someone who's been in the media journalism side his whole career. I mean, he knows media as well as I know parking. And that was one of the things I knew is like, that's not me. John had that background. That's what he did. So he could step in there. I don't. And so that was one of my kind of early additions to the team, as someone who had that background. And Jay is that kind of yin to my yang, and he does enforce our journalistic integrity. And so if there is ever a time where I'm like, hey, what this? And Jay's that kind of, hunch on my shoulder, be like, oh, maybe not. So like we work well on that side. I'm not saying I'm trying to push things, but I'm an entrepreneur. That's what we do. And so like he's great on that perspective. And so we've worked on, how do we modernize and update the look and feel of the magazine? How do we modernize and look the feel of our website? We've now actually gone through 2 different website revisions since I've had it for, differing reasons, but just like learning what we've done, building on what was done on the ParkNews site. ParkNews, I said from the beginning, was one of the strongest pieces there within the kind of Parking Today portfolio. So how do we take that and the great work that was done with the people who ran that before, and let's do it better. Let's leverage technology and let's actually integrate that into other things that we're doing. So whereas before ParkNews kind of was its own standalone site, and if you look at our website now, it's been, not only does it have its own site on the website, it's now been integrated to the front page. It's been integrated into our newsletter. So and even now, going back to Pi, we now have a ParkNews track there at pie. So it's a matter of like, how do we leverage what was really being done well, what people really enjoy, because people like ParkNews, what they get out of it. So we've done that. And then looking at, new technologies like a podcast network and, how do we bring technology into what we're doing? John was, and now he probably is an author and a publisher. He's not a technology guy. I'm a technology guy who's not an author and a publisher. So I've really brought a lot of that technology first focus to what we're doing there as a business. And so that's also been a lot of the kind of underlying pieces that you probably wouldn't see from the outside, but just a full revamp of what that tech stack looks like, both off the shelf and even some of the stuff that we're building ourselves at this point for, tools that we need there for the organization.
Yeah. Okay. So the magazine is still there, but just the whole idea of modernization. I know that digital first or technology first was a big focus for you. That makes a lot of sense. Can you tease us with anything that's coming from a Parking Today media perspective?
One of our big pushes this year, but after Pi, is going to be a push into video. We certainly know there is a place for video. And I look at our content and I look at what I call channels in my mind. So I look at each of our channels, the print and then kind of website, digital and newsletters, podcast being one. To me, video is one of those channels that we're not serving as well as we should be. And we want Parking Today to be a place where, if you're a parking professional, we're that first place you go to. And we know that parking professionals have lots of different ways they want to consume their content. And so if you want to consume our content in a video fashion, we need to meet you there. And so that's another one of those things that we had to take care and build on a lot of other things first before we got there. But we're now at a point, once we get past Pi, to kind of lean more into the video side, both from our own, content and also working with our partners to do that. So you'll see more video out of us moving forward. You're also going to see more technology around kind of what we're doing ourselves. So actually, one of the first times you'll see is actually at Pi. So the Pi app is actually an app that we're developing ourselves. So it's actually a homegrown app that we've built, both because I like doing that stuff. And frankly, Claude code is magical. And so, the ability to, now I'm not developing it. We actually have a developer on the team. Actually, that's another change. Parking Today has a full-time developer on staff. And so it's probably rare for most media companies, but it kind of leans into that kind of technology side. So that's one of the things that we actually are building and will roll out there at the show is a show app designed kind of for the unique needs of our show, the unique needs of our content, and actually building in some of those networking type aspects, which we can talk about later if you want, but that are unique to our show, but only work if the technology is fully integrated. So leveraging that concept of knowing what we need, kind of being early on in this AI piece to kind of build some really, really customized is the wrong word, but really unique sets of technology that does kind of blend what we do well as an overall organization and to those kind of unique needs of our show and our audience.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good tease. It sounds like maybe we'll have to learn more about that once you get Pi under your belt. But clearly the wheels are turning over at Parking Media Today. So good for you. I think Heidi would totally agree with you that video is super important. So I think she would applaud the move to video for sure. Let's talk about Pi. The first big thing, the most obvious thing, is that you're moving it. And so tell us about the move to Texas and what do you think Texas offers from a support perspective and an ease of use perspective that didn't exist in Schaumburg, Illinois?
Sure. And the Chicago area certainly has been long tied to Pi. And I think a lot of us have had, a lot of good experiences there over the years. The move to Texas was for a couple of reasons. One, we're the first national show of the year. I wanted to show, and since our audience involves the whole industry, I wanted us to be equally accessible to everyone here in kind of North America. So Dallas is central. I know some people who think about Chicago as being central. It's not. If you look at a map, Dallas is. So I wanted something that actually was equally accessible from kind of all parts. I wanted something that had quick one-hop flights for the majority of our audience, but even worldwide. There's a company out of Australia who's going to be coming to us, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it's a one-hop flight for me." I was like, "It's a long hop, but still." So being able to get to those shows kind of there in one flight was important for me. Having multiple kind of options there with airports. Right? You have two major airports there, so lots of direct flights in from a price perspective. Dallas also offers us the hotel we picked there, the Hilton Anatole. It's a fantastic hotel. It's close to all the things you might want to do. But if you don't want to leave campus, there's plenty of things to do there. So we wanted to find that mixture of It's comfortable. It's welcoming. If you want to go out and do things, great. If you want to go downtown, you're there in 5 minutes. If you want, there's, a bunch of really nice restaurants, 5-10 minute drive away, but also good restaurants there while you're there, but at a price point that people can actually get to. And even, including a lower than our book rate, GSA rate for our government audience. The other thing about Dallas is we also wanted some place that was relatively neutral for people coming. If you go to some of these other cities, it can be difficult to get approval because your boss is asking you, once we talked before, your boss who doesn't quite understand what you're doing, why are you going to this entertainment destination? Like, sure, it's a parking conference. Like, you're actually going to do whatever, right? So we wanted some place that people had heard about and was easy to get to, but yet there was never any of those questions on, what else are you going? Like, no one's like, wait, you're secretly going to Dallas to go get whatever. No, like, you're going to Dallas to go to Dallas, right? Dallas is great, but it's not known for these other things. So we wanted that also to make it easier for people to be able to get the approval to be able to come and kind of enjoy the show there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So their first impression when they get there, what will be different?
So walking in from a hotel perspective, like whether you fly in or you drive in, easy to get to, lots of on-site parking, which is actually discounted, quick trip there from the airport. It's laid out in a space where your check-in is right next to where you're going to be staying. We're actually in a tower there, so you can check in, walk straight in, go up the elevator, come back down. Two, the hotel has the largest or second largest, I have no way of verifying it, art collection in a hotel. So you're actually going to notice museum-grade art pieces throughout the hotel. But the nice thing also about it is as we know these parking conferences, sometimes it is nice to be able to get away and have some extra space. There's a whole second area of the hotel that's connected to their atrium area, which is a quick 2-minute walk. But yet if you want to go do something in the evening or you want to go leave, you're 5 minutes away from a bunch of things to do there in the DFW area.
Okay. All right. So that sounds like you've made it as convenient as possible to get in and get around. Tell us a little bit about the content. So how will the content be different? What are some surprises? Give us some more. Tease us some more about some of the content.
Sure. So we've set up the block, as I mentioned before, with this idea of we start together, we break out into kind of our individual areas, we kind of end back together. The session blocks are set up where one set of blocks are more what we call segment focused, so municipal or higher education, facility design, consultant. Then the other block, and those be more kind of topics that are for people who are in those areas, because we know there's unique challenges. It's different to run a university than it is to run a city. So we want to have topics and sessions that are unique to those challenges or opportunities. And then the other set of sessions are all different topics that are applicable to the broader industry. So this year we're doing, and we pick those topics ourselves. So just like with our publication, we curate the content there. We curate the content at our show as well. So it's actually something that Jay and I put together on an ongoing basis. So topics this year are policy and legal. We have AI, but the AI is much more of like what you need to know to utilize AI. It's not like a whiz bang, like it's amazing. No, it's like, what does it do well? What does not do well? Like you walk away feeling better knowing about it. Parking standards, which is one of the things that are really big for me. Operations, facility design. We're doing one called data stories, which are parking stories told from a data aspect. So using that data to kind of tell and move forward the stories. One of the really fun ones there is we're actually working with the director of parking for the San Francisco 49ers, who's going to be doing a session about how he uses data to manage events, everything from a Taylor Swift concert all the way to an NFL game, and how they look different. So he's actually saying that a Taylor Swift concert looks more like a Saturday football game than what a Bon Jovi concert does. Because Swifties actually tailgate, whereas folks come to see Bon Jovi don't. And so so using the data to help describe and the changes he makes around that. So stories around that. We have Real Talk. That's our human focused side of, parking people are people first. So talking about those kind of human aspects of being in parking. One of the ones I like about that one is we have the session called You're Not the Villain in This Story. Because for so many of these parking people, they are the villain in everyone else's story, but they're not the villain in their own story. So how do you deal with that, duality on a regular basis? So we have someone coming in talking about that. We have our Accelerate, which is our early stage parking competition, early stage parking company competition. And then new this year is ParkNews. So we're actually taking ParkNews stories and then getting kind of the stories beyond the headlines. So actually bringing the people there and from the stories, kind of get that kind of like, that old Paul, but I'm aging myself now, but the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story kind of behind that, that quick blip that you see there.
Yeah. Okay. You want to tease us with one of the rest of the stories?
Yeah, we actually have someone coming in, and I'm not going to kind of steal too much of the thunder, but one of the stories was a city in Florida who went to paid parking and has had quite a bit of backlash in the community about going to paid parking. So we actually have had a couple ParkNews stories about that city. We're actually bringing in the person who's who helped take them to be paid parking, is dealing with running that paid parking as from that perspective. So yeah, that is one of the examples. We're actually working through a couple other ones that we're still getting nailed down. One thing I will say about all of our sessions, this is probably important, is none of our sessions are recorded. And none of our sessions that we do twice. And one of the things we've designed in this show is this idea that, especially since COVID, but I think both post-COVID and even now with AI, people want experiences. And so we want Pi to be something that you experience because you're there. And much like going to a concert, it'll never be that same concert again. And it's better because you're there. And so all of these sessions really are designed where A, they're not recorded so you can have honest conversations, but B, the fact that if you're not there, you're missing out on whatever's going to be talked about. So we want to create that feeling of, this is something that you're experiencing together. And it's also a session that you're not going to hear again. That's one of the other things we ask all of our speakers is they all agree that the session they're doing at Pi is not a session they've done before or a session they will do again. So it is a one-off opportunity to be able to see and interact with that in that moment.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I like that a lot. So what didn't I ask you about Pi that you would like to convey to our listeners?
I would say on a broad basis, we have thought through, or we have thought through all the things that make a good show, both from a attendee side and from a vendor side. And we've been very intentional on how we've designed it. My old developer side is coming back out, but we really have thought through like what is the needs, like what is the purpose, how we design the show. So I will say, for those of you who have come to Pi before and have had a great time, we've kept the things that are unique and good about Pi. For those of you who have come and maybe it wasn't your favorite show, we've done a lot that is different this year. And for those of you who've never come, it's always been amazing. You're going to love it. But we really have leaned into this idea of the fact that trade shows and conferences need to be different in today's day and age. And so we really have thought through, what does a show in 2026 need to be? And while honoring the 26-year legacy of Pi, but also recognizing the fact that it's not it's not 2000 anymore. So we have to update the show and do things differently. So we would love for people to come back and, experience Pi again for the first time and kind of see what we're building here.
Okay. And so that sort of dovetails into my last question about Pi in particular. So what would make you feel good about how Pi 26 is received by the industry?
For me, I want people to feel welcome and to feel connected. I want the people who are there to walk away saying, I felt welcome. I felt like I was among my people. I want Pi to be that place where the rest of your job, you're dealing with people who don't understand what you do. At Pi, you're among, I hate to use the word family, but you're among parking family. You're among a place that gets you with all all the warts, and that we know you, we see you, we appreciate you. So I want people to feel that, and I especially want people to feel like and have the experience of, I met new people. I am walking away with connections that I know I can reach back out. And it's a show it's a feeling of warmth from. So for me, it really goes back to that individual experience. And so we'll know how we've done when we reach back out to people and do our surveys afterwards. But for me, it's going to be the smiles on people's faces and they're, letting us know how they felt about it as much as anything else.
Yeah, that's a good thing to aspire to for sure. Okay, so I want to transition to another pet project of yours, the Parking Hall of Fame. So tell me about what inspired the creation of the Parking Hall of Fame.
So Parking Hall of Fame, I will say, is something, and he doesn't like me telling this story, but I will. This was Isaiah Mao's idea. So Isaiah had this idea, and he came to me and he's like, hey, I have this idea. Would you be interested in doing something? And before he could finish, I said, absolutely. This is, for me, having some way to acknowledge that work that has been done in the industry is so important. And this takes nothing away from the membership awards that are being given to, by these membership associations. They do a great job honoring their members, but the industry is broader than any one membership association. So we wanted awards that really were for the overall industry, both in the US and abroad. So that's what we got started. We worked on it for a while. Then Catherine was one of our other co-founders. So the three of us were the ones who found it. It is an independent nonprofit. We wanted to be its own independent entity to be able to kind of represent the industry. We've brought on a great board of people from across the industry, a board of trustees who are actually running the actual organization. And so it's, how do we honor these legends in the industry? And also, how do we help remember the history? I think we haven't done a great job of remembering our history because so many other people say that parking isn't important. I think sometimes we take that on ourselves. And so for me, the Parking Hall of Fame is that way of saying, no, this is important. Our history is important. These legends need to be honored. And so this is kind of our first step in doing that. And we're so excited for this first class to be announced, and then there at Pi to be able to have our first ever ceremony and dinner to kind of install and celebrate these inductees.
Well, so I guess that maybe that leads into, every Hall of Fame now, you sort of, the announcers are like, clearly a future Hall of Famer, because everybody sort of in their mind has the standard of what a Hall of Famer is. How did you get to the standard through this first iteration?
It was a process. I will say one of the things we did is we spent a lot of time talking to other Hall of Fames. So we talked about, what are your standards? What's your process? What's your rubric? And so we did a lot of our homework beforehand. We worked among our initial three founders and with the broader board of coming up with our kind of standards there for, what qualifies someone. And we really were looking for, what has been their impact on the industry. Have they made, key changes? Has their impact been just local or has it been broader? Is it, one of those situations where they've been an obvious positive impact on their overall community and as well themselves? And also for us, have they, from a broader kind of standards perspective, are they someone that kind of represents the kind of high standards of both the organization as well as the overall industry? So some of that's subjective. So of course we went out and had our nomination process. People were nominated. We then went through and had kind of a rubric where the nomination committee saw the nominations, then kind of had its own internal discussions and had their own vote. One of the things we did actually structure the organization to be is the board of trustees is not the nominating committee. Those two are separate. For this first year, we set it up for the three founders were part of that, part of both. But moving forward, that actually won't be the case. And we've kind of built that on purpose as we want to be able to have a clear separation there and have the nomination committee be able to struggle and work through. And this first year, one of those key discussions was like, is this person someone who is a first ballot Hall of Famer? Are they someone, on that proverbial Mount Rushmore of parking? And it was hard. I mean, we got a lot of nominations, and when the slate comes out, I think you'll see it's as far as great as the people are in that first slate, there's a lot of people who just, we have 100 years to catch up on. So, it was hard there, but I think when you see the slate, what we also strive for was someone who's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They've really made the impact. And ideally, we wanted something that the majority of people in the industry could see themselves in. So there is a good variety of types of people and roles and, even geographies that are represented here in this first class that, ideally it's someone that you can see yourself in, but also for some of these younger people in the industry, something you can strive towards. Like, hey, I can be that person who gets in the Hall of Fame. So it's something that's parking as industry that it's, worth having a Hall of Fame for, worth staying in, that, you can have an outsized impact and actually, change an industry in positive ways.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So the first slate of honorees will be announced at Pi?
No, they will be announced next week. So we are actually, depending on when this gets published, but as this recording, we'll actually, next week, we'll be reaching out to the people who have been elected into the Hall of Fame. So we'll be making those phone calls, and then we'll be doing an announcement at the end of next week. So yeah, so we're announcing everyone. Then that gives everyone time to be able to notify friends and family, come. That celebration dinner is open to everyone. You do have to actually get a reservation, but there's no charge to go to it. You just need to get reserved for it. But it is that Tuesday night there at Pi. So it's there at Pi. Everyone's welcome, but we want to make sure people have time to be able to come in, bring the family, and kind of celebrate there. Honoring these people, and so everyone has their time. Their proverbial 10 minutes of fame there, getting into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. It's a great idea. I can't wait to be there to celebrate with all the first ballot Hall of Famers in parking. All right, so let's come around the bend here. We're gonna do the lightning round again. Let's see if any of your answers change from the last time. I don't remember them, but somebody I suppose could go back and compare them, right? And hopefully I won't stump you. So first question is, what phrase are you known for?
Well, I can tell you there's some phrases I would hope I would be known for. One of my favorite ways to describe parking is deceptively complex.
Mm,
So that is a phrase I would use. I don't know if it's actually been attributed to me yet, but that is, as far as I know, I'm the only one who I've heard saying it, but it is a phrase I use often to describe this industry.
that's hilarious. Okay. So has the answer changed to what's the hardest thing you've ever done in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's at this point, it's parking today. It really has been on a business side. Obviously, we talked
Sure.
last year about personal stuff, but on the business side, absolutely. This revamping a 30-year-old company was a unique set of challenges that I was required new sets of skills I did not have. So there was a lot of learning and growing in the middle of keeping a company running on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. It's, a story of growth and a story of revival or renewal, maybe for you in particular. Okay, so Kevin, last year in 2025, the answer you gave to the hardest part of your parking job was moving the organization forward while maintaining what's expected. Is that still the case?
Not as much. Oh, actually, I wouldn't say so. We mentioned before how it took about 18 months before I felt like I really had touched and I understood everything. And so when we talked last year, I still was in the middle of that learning what some of these things were. And so since the last time we talked, I do finally feel like every part of the business I've been able to interact with, make changes I need to, and I understand it well enough where it's the organization is running. We have great people in the organization moving forward. I just didn't know all the parts and pieces yet when we asked that last time. And I feel much more, that's not to say there won't be a surprise and I probably just jinxed myself, but I feel much more comfortable in all the things that need to be done for this organization on a baseline basis, but also from what needs to be done to move it to where we want it to be.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. All right. And so then if you could wave your magic wand and change anything about parking or parking today, I'll take either answer. What do you think?
So if I could wave a magic wand to change anything in parking, I would have the industry be further along and better about standards.
Mm,
And so it's yesterday, actually, I was talking to Sarah, I forget Sarah's last name, from who runs the national parking platform over in the UK. And she's actually going to be one of our speakers of the show. And listening to her and what they've been able to do, and they're growing, but having a common standard where companies can talk and you do have a common language between both your organizations there, in her case on the city side, and then your technology pieces. To me, I think that's one of the things that the US, ironically enough, who invented APDS, but then it's being used so much more elsewhere than this here. And so I'm not saying it has to be APDS or there's a couple other ones there, but just I think it's an industry. And that is one of the reasons why at Pi we have a parking standards tracked. And it's one of the things that we actually write about is because as an industry, I think we're going to be better off both from an innovation side, from a customer service perspective. Parker experience is when you do have this ability to have some interoperability. And to me, that's a sign of a maturing industry. And if you look at other mature industries, that is one of those next steps they take is a interoperability between pieces. So I feel like we're growing into that, and hopefully we can help nudge the industry forward on that. But if I could fix that tomorrow, that would be something that, and I'm like I said, I don't know which one it would be, but to me, having that standard that I think would make the industry better overall.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it really just comes down to somebody's got to figure out how to make money by having standards, or somebody's going to have to go first. It's almost chicken and egg, frankly. And, we're still making money by not having standards. And when somebody implicates it and we have to follow standards, I think that's when you're going to start to see things change.
There's a clear way of doing it. I will invite everyone. There'll be another shameless pitch. Come see Sarah's presentation at Pi. What they're doing with the MPP, I think, can absolutely be a roadmap. It won't be the same, but they're doing some really impressive things with way more than what I thought. And I'm really excited to have people hear what she's talking about, and when she's going to be featured quite a bit in our publication as well, because I think they've done a great job, to your point, of finding a way to make it profitable both for the companies as well as for the municipalities that they're dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm going to show up for sure. So last year, just so you know, the one thing you would change, you said greed. Interesting. I might have to go back and re-listen to that episode to try and put myself where you were in 2025.
It's interesting. I have a couple guesses, but I might have to go back and listen myself.
Okay. All right, we'll leave that one right there. Okay, so I wonder if what you do in your spare time has changed in a year. So what do you do when you're not parking cars now?
The honest answer is we are in much like a startup mode. We are in like there is no extra time. We are absolutely in that phase of, from a time spent perspective, the vast majority of my day is spent doing Parking Today stuff. Well, Parking Today or Parking Hall of Fame, or I mean, that's helping just launch a new, because of course it's not enough to just have an organization, your own organization to help start a new nonprofit. That's of course still that on top of what you're doing. So there is not necessarily a whole lot. Anything that I'm not is time spent back there with family. But even that's not as much as I would like at this point. Hopefully when we have this conversation next time, I have a better answer for you. But we really are in that, there's a lot to get done and a lot of opportunity there. And so we're making the most of the opportunity we have in front of us.
Yeah. I can tell though that you've got your hands on the levers. I can hear the confidence that barring any surprises, that your finger's on the pulse of where it needs to be to drive it. Now it's just a matter of making it happen, right? It's pure execution.
That's the idea. And frankly, and listening. And that's one of the things I always like to ask people to do is, look, we're fundamentally, I'm a problem solver. And so we can't make things better if we don't know what's going on. So that's all I always ask people is, like, let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you think, good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot easier to control those levers when you actually are getting a feedback loop. I will say that's been one of the more challenging things on the media side is we put out a magazine and we sometimes hear from people, but it's, we rarely often hear about it immediately or even for an article. I mean, sometimes, but that feedback loop isn't as tight knit as what I've been used to on the technology side. I mean, if yourself, you roll out a feature and people love, you'll hear about it. You break something, you're going to hear about it. So like that's been interesting and kind of how longer of a feedback cycle we have there in the media world, which is taking some adjustment for me and having to find some other ways of getting that feedback to help make and ideally control those levers more accurately.
Yeah, no doubt. Talking into a black hole is a big challenge. And whenever anybody would raise their hand and say, hey, Brian, I really liked your article, or I'm not sure anybody ever took issue with anything that I said, but it was always nice to hear positive feedback because you're never quite sure if anybody's reading it.
Those are some of my favorite moments when I do talk to someone like, oh my gosh, yeah, like I just got the magazine, or like, oh, I was reading the magazine on the airplane, or I really enjoy. So like hearing those back, you're like, okay, there are people out there, they are enjoying it. So it just, I guess, not too dissimilar to what our audience lives on a daily basis, right? When we do a great job, people aren't, shouting from the woodworks, that was an amazing article. Like, oh, good article. They move on with their lives, which is what we're supposed to do. So it's, I guess, more similar than what I just had even thought about till right now.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, last question. What are you most proud of?
I would say I'm most proud of the way our family has kind of come together for this. So Parking Today, when I mentioned this last time, it was an acquisition by us. It was our family, and the family knew about going into it. It was our own funds. We don't have any other investors. There's no, it is a lot of risk and sacrifice, and the family was on board before we did it, but the family really has come together in supportive ways, in visible ways that people might see, in a lot of ways they wouldn't, both from a support perspective and pitching in. And so it has been such a rewarding aspect from that side of seeing the family, even including my daughters who are, adults and out of the house, but everyone is behind it, helps as they can. And so that has been very rewarding from my perspective and something that really haven't experienced before, because it's not been one of those, like, the family knew, but for New Park, I was one of four. I mean, we started it with 3 other people, so it wasn't by any means mine. In fact, I came in last in the group, but for this, no, we made a family bet, and the family really has been willing to support it and frankly make sacrifices. This has not been at no cost to them. And so they have been willing to bear those sacrifices and be supportive of what we're trying to do here. And that is one of the really fun things, is why we like bringing like Elliot, my youngest, came last year, as you know. My older son Tobias will be coming this year. That's why I like them being able to see it, because they can see something tangible on what that sacrifice and work actually looks like, and actually be able to see what that is, which is also so rewarding to me on that sort of basis.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What a great answer. And I can see the pride in your face. So that's great. You're all in it together. You're all in the boat. So you're leading parking today at a moment when the industry is asking bigger questions, how it works, how it shows up, how it tells a story. I think with Pi heading to Dallas and the publication marking 30 years, there's a lot happening and a lot riding on getting it right. I can hear that in your voice. So I want to say thank you for coming back on the show, for sharing what you've learned in your in your second year, I guess, and for the role you're playing in keeping the industry informed and connected from an independent perspective. So for anyone planning to attend Pi 2026 or looking to stay plugged in with what's happening across parking, we'll include links to Parking Today and the Pi Show in the notes. And the last thing is, I understand that you're offering promo codes for the listeners of Harder Than It Looks. Tell us about that.
We do, yeah. So for your listeners, we have a code just for your listeners. If they use the code HTIL100, and I believe we'll have those in the show notes as well, but HTIL100, it'll get them 100% off a standard registration. So you can actually attend Pi as a standard registrant for complimentary cost, basically got compliments of Harder Than It Looks. So super excited to get there. And that's one of the things we're trying to do is we want to get everyone to be able to come to the show. And so that is one of the ways we're working to make sure the fact that if you want to come to Dallas, we want to find a way to help get you there. So super excited to be able to share that with your listeners.
That's definitely a twist. So thank you for that. All right, Kevin, thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you in March.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Brian.
That's a wrap on this episode of Harder Than It Looks, Parking Uncovered, presented by Parker Technology. Please leave us a review if you liked what you heard. Make sure you tune in next month as we continue to uncover tips, tricks, and best practices to manage what we all know is harder than it looks, parking a car. Bye for now.